Okay, so welcome to the Foglight REST API overview session. I call it 101 because I expect a mixed crowd here, some with little to no experience with programming or API programming, and others who are pros who have done API stuff before or even have worked on Foglight REST API too. So this is a session of overview so that we could get everyone on the same page to a point where you can explore this further after this session today. So for the session today, we'll be looking at the basics of the REST API, and then I'll do a demo with one example API client. I'll do the basic demo first and then pause for questions. And if you have any questions at that time, we can clear that and then look at some of the other examples that we have, time permitting. Okay, Foglight REST API intro. I would assume most of you, if not all, have some sort of software programming or software background. So you would have heard the term API, Application Programming Interface. It allows you to check in with another program. In simple terms, it is simply talking between two software programs. Now, as an interface, as you would know with the software background, you can decide what you expose. So you can call and use only those that are exposed through the interface. And I don't want to get too technical here, but REST API is a web-based API. There are other web-based APIs too. But REST API simply means that it follows a REST software architectural design. And I would just leave it at that. But it has a lot of advantages, as you would notice in the recent past, that most softwares are moving to REST API with all the advantages like faster response times and better page loading time when you make REST API calls, and that's why people choose REST API. We can do a little bit of reading if you want to know more about REST API as a technology. Now, when you make API calls, you will have a response, and that's why we do a call. And so these responses can be in any of the formats that I've listed there, XML and JSON being the most common. And you have API clients, so then it can be any software program. So some of the examples are you can call these API, you can make these API calls from a Java program, from a Python script or a shell script or whatever tool that you're using. Now, if you wonder, hey, I don't know Java, or I know Java, but I'm not an active programmer, or I don't want to write a script from the beginning to make these API calls, or I don't want to do a lot of these programming just to know what these Foglight API is, then you are in luck because you have sample API clients that you can use without having to program. So during the demo session, I'll introduce one of those API clients so that it is easier for us to see how this API works without having to go back to our programming days, for some of us at least, and do all the hard work just to see how this API works. So there are easier ways to do that. Now, some basics regarding Foglight REST API. It is available in versions 5.7.5.x and later. I assume most of us and customers would be on 5.9 versions, but if anyone wants to try this out on older FMSs, you can do that. And if I'm not mistaken, 5.7.5.7 came installed with the REST API cartridge. So if you're on an older version on 5.7.5, you can download REST API cartridge from the support link and install it on your server. So 5.7.5.x or later, you have Foglight REST API. Now, yes, you need a user permission, and like any API, we have a restriction on what users can use API or log in to API, and it requires the API access role. You can do that from the administration's users dashboard and assign this specific role for the user you want to use for API calls. Now, how do you log in? Obviously, when you give access to an user, you have a username password that you can use to log in to the API. Now, you use these in the request body, and not many would want to use their passwords in clear text. So starting in 5.7.5.7, we have a token login also. So this token, again, can be copied from the user's administration dashboard. So you can use the token instead of the username and password, and most customers would want to use this login method anyway. So this is the auth token. You have two ways to log into the Foglight API. Now, all APIs would have a path that is relative. All Foglight REST API calls are relative to this path. And the path is API/v1, as in version 1. As time goes, if we have different versions of APIs, we would probably have different paths. So you can have different APIs in different versions. So any API calls that you make will be relative to this path. Now, we have another token called the access token, which is different from the token that you use to log in. It is a token that you can use to access any APIs. So just check once more. I think some of you are still unmuted. Anyway, if you can find your mute button and if you can mute yourself, that will be helpful. So you have the access token, and this token is required for any API calls except the login API. So the login API uses the authentication token, and once you log in, you get a response, and in that response there is an access token, and that token can be used to access any of the APIs.
Is not available. At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options. To leave a callback number, press 5.
Could you guys hear me still, I believe? I can't find
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. So access token, it has a timeout of 30 minutes by default, and it is configurable in the registry variables. And so that token is good for 30 minutes. And after that, if you want to make another API call, you would have to go into the login API, get the access token, and then continue. We'll demonstrate that during our demo time, and that will be a bit more clearer then. And then Foglight REST API. So in the previous slide, we talked about different types of responses that APIs can send. And if I'm not mistaken, all of our APIs are either XML or JSON. I don't think we have any HTML response or a text response. So all of our responses are either XML or JSON. Now we have an administration dashboard called REST API. So say you have 20 Foglight REST APIs that are there. And as an administrator, you don't want to give access to, say, a couple of them. So you can use this dashboard in the administration space to restrict access for any APIs that you would want. And remember, that is not for just the user, but for the entire system. So as an administrator, you might have, say, 5 API developers out there, and you don't want them to access one particular API for some reason, some sensitive data or something. You can do that from the REST API dashboard. There are a number of registry variables that are available. One of them was what I mentioned earlier about the access token timeout. One good thing is all the registry variables start with REST. So you can go to the registry variables dashboard and search for REST, and then you see all of the registry variables and their uses. Now, documentation. You have plenty of documentation. You go to the Foglight Console Help tab and search for REST, and you see the Foglight REST API.
You have reached the maximum time permitted for recording your message. If you're satisfied with the message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3.
I suppose that's not the WebEx recording.
If you're satisfied with the message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3. If you're satisfied with the message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3.
Could you guys hear that too?
Sorry you're having trouble. Your message has
Yeah, we can.
Please try again later. Goodbye.
Hey, Viju, you can unmute everybody and just you can mute everybody and just unmute yourself, and people can unmute when they need. I think that's the best because it keeps interrupting you.
Yeah, I thought that's what I did, but let me try again. I suppose everyone can hear me now. Okay, let's continue. So there's help for the REST API, and that is a comprehensive guide. You have every API call that we have listed there with examples and the usage and the syntax, and you have all the REST registry variables there, and it has a description of what it does. So that is a pretty comprehensive guide that you have there. So you could use that when you have a need. Now, step 1. Obviously, step 1 is login. Without logging in, you cannot do anything. And as we already mentioned, you can log in using your username or password, or you can use the authentication token. During the demo, I'll show you how to get the auth token. You have a response, and the response of the login API will contain access token among other stuff. So you can take note of the access token then, and after that you can make any subsequent API calls for 30 minutes by default. And once you're up, and if you want to do more, then you go back to the login API, get the access token, and do your stuff again. And the login API path, as you would see there, is API path /security/login. And if you remember, the API path is server URL /API /v1. So that is relative path, and then all the APIs are relative to this API path. So that's the login, and we'll do a demo. So as I was saying, you don't need to program a Java or a Python script or a shell script or whatever to try this out. Because if that was the case, then not many of us would want to do that. But we have a API dev environment. Well, we have several such tools available, and one such tool is GetPostman, and you can download the installer from their website. You have an installer for Mac too, and I believe a Chrome plugin also. Now you could use that for any API development that you have for any software, including Foglight. Now, one advantage of GetPostman is we have samples for every Foglight REST API there. So you could import these samples from a link onto your own Postman install, and then you can play with it. So you have all the examples there, and then you can refer that, and that is pretty easy and yeah, that's an advantage. For using the REST API, obviously you have to define some of the variables that we already talked about in GetPostman, or even if you're doing it in Java or in shell script, you would have to have all of these variables in some form defined. So it contains the server URL, the port, the API path that we already looked at, username, password, if that's how you log in, or the auth token. The token value is the variable name that is used in the GetPostman samples, and that is actually the access token. And the response type, the variable used is accept value, and you can set your response type accordingly, XML or JSON. So these are some of the environment variables that we would be setting on the GetPostman. And we are good for a demo. I would go through to the demo. I'll do some very simple examples at first, and then I'll pause for questions, because if you have any right now, at least some of them will be answered when we do the demo. And so for the demo, let me just going through what we discussed already real quick. Hope you all can see my Foglight console right now. Going to administrations, users, and go into the users, look at the roles, and API access. This is what you need for the Foglight user to use API, REST API. Now, when you click on the user, you can set the auth token here, or delete them and reset it. So when you set it as is described here, the previous token becomes invalid. So when you can do this to disconnect all of your REST API clients if you have multiple clients. This is one way to control it. It doesn't get expired until you do this setting or deleting. So I'll just set it again, just so that you know how the token looks like. I'll make a copy of this so that I can use it later on. So this is how you do the auth token. Talked about the REST API administration dashboard. This is where you can set access. You can simply click on this button to disable it, and none of your API clients would be able to use this API. We'll come to this a bit later on. and the registry variables. These are all pretty straightforward. I just wanted to show you. And I search for REST, and you get all of these. Like some of these are used in advanced queries. So all of that has description in the help reference guide, so you can use that. This is the 30 minutes timeout for the access token and some of the other registry variables there. And in the help, you have the reference guide, API reference guide, and you have an overview. You have all the REST APIs here. These are all the REST APIs that are available, and each of them will have a description on what to do. So for example, under alarms, you have so many API calls that you can do, and each of them have description and the usage and the syntax. So it's pretty comprehensive guide that you have here. Now, so when you install Postman, you get an installer. Well, it's just a download. You can do that on Mac too. Open the Postman, and then you have an import. So click on import from link, and you can use the link that is in the slides that I showed earlier, and you could import all the examples. And once you import it, this is what you see. You have 58 samples. You can thank the dev team, I believe, or others who were developing it at that time to come up with these many examples. So these are all API calls. These are all examples. We'll go through some of them later on to understand how it is. And so without having to write any line of code, you can now test out a lot of these API calls. You can go to settings and you can manage your environment variables. You could add a new one. I already have one here. And this is where I mentioned you need to have your server URL. The FMS that I'm trying out today is on my own machine, so localhost port. This is the API path. This is the token value. If you remember, that is the access token. This is the old one that is in there. We'll change that later when we do the demo. An accept value is the response type. So you need to have application/XML or JSON as you like it. So these are some of the global variables that you can define. You can also define your username and password here globally or specifically for the APIs that you want to use. Same is the case with the auth token. So you can either define it here in the global variable so that all of them can have it, or just use it for the specific ones that you want to use. Now, so this is the first example that we're going to use. This is using the username password. So if you go to the body, you have a username and password parameters. You can put in those values here and hit send, and you'll get a response. So this is when I was still starting up my Foglight earlier on, and you got a response here. So let me demo that. Hit send. That's all you need. If you look at the URL here, you have the server URL, you have the API path, and this is the API for login, security/login. You have the username and password defined, and you hit send. That's all you need to do in the Postman tool. This is the response that you get. You get quite a fair bit of stuff here. You have the access token. This is what you would want to use for any other API calls. So you want to take note of that. And then it has the logged in username and the roles that it has. Just a little bit of data there. So this is a typical response from an API call. So you did a login API, and this is the response that you get using username and password. So you get the access token. Let us look at one more example. This is using the auth token. So instead of the username password, you simply use the auth token. So remember, I copied the auth token from the Foglight console earlier. I'm going to use that now. Or maybe I can just show you how, when you use an older one, how you see the response. So you hit send, says login is invalid. So this is the response that you get. Let me update. Oh, sorry. Let me update the auth token that I had copied. This is the new one, and should be good to go. Hit send. Here you go. And you have the response here. You can copy this access token for the rest of your session. Good for 30 minutes. Let me see. Okay, so I'm copying this access token. Now I'll put this in the global variables so I can access it from anywhere. So far as the login API, I will just use one example and then I'll pause for questions. So this is an API user/current. It gives you the details of the current user. So you don't have to pass anything. This is the API call that you make. You have updated the access token in the variables, so you should be able to make this API call. Simply click send. Ta-da! So you're using your access token to access this API, and you get details of your logged in user with all the roles. Let me give you another example. Okay, get alarm current. It will get you all the alarms in the system. Hit send. There you go. This is a typical XML response that you get. This is one alarm. This is two. There are plenty of alarms on my system. So these are all the alarms that you have. So typically what you do is you make an API call such as this one. You get all the alarms, and then your client would then parse through this, select which ones that you want to note, and make use of that. So that's how you usually make these calls. So likewise, you could try out any of these API calls. Just simply get there and hit send, and you will get it. You'll get the response right then and there, and this makes it so much easier for you to learn all the REST APIs that we have. Now at this point, I want to pause for questions so we can make sure that everyone's on the same page. Once you're at this point, you can try out a lot of the other things with the help of the samples here and the doc. So I'm going to let it open for questions if you have any. Remember to unmute yourself if you want to ask, or use the chat window.
Biju, this is Jesus from Panama office. One quick question: how do you use the auto login feature that was included in 5.9.2? Sorry, I understand that uses just the auth token instead of the access token.
So you're talking about the auto token?
Yeah, the auto login. Because I noticed that on your Foglight you had that auth token auto login enabled.
I'm not sure. I think I read that somewhere, but it was still about auth token. Maybe I'm wrong. So where did you see? Is that in the registry variables that you saw?
Yeah, on the registry variables, there's the auth token auto login. It's like the 6th row. Yeah.
Yeah. What is that? I have no idea. So that means that just the auth token is required and not the access token anymore?
Yeah, that's yeah. I was wondering about that because I haven't used that. So
I need to find more about that. Unless someone on the call can answer that for sure. If not, I'll find the right answer. I did read about it, but I wasn't aware of.
Yes. So I think we could cover this is new functionality in 592. We could cover this in the next session. It's about using the auth token only without need to using the auth token to get an access token, which will automatically, like by default, is expire in half hour.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a security feature that was. I was going to say that was a security security feature that will expire. That will make the token expire in 30 minutes.
Right.
Is that the token that we generate using the UI on the user itself?
Yes.
In Foglight?
Yes.
Okay, which expires basically, not like the other ones that expires every 30 minutes. So basically, it's the first token we use to log in to get a token, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one here. Okay, all right.
Yeah. So the usually when we do the programming integration to call the RESTful API, we would want to use the access token, which has the expiration period, like default is 30 minutes. And that auth token bypass the access token login is for the system integration. We done that for, like, for example, some of the system, they use the token to keep the token in the connection with the Foglight. So yeah, that's the for specifically for the system and system integration. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that is if you have this set to true, and you could set this to false, and then you would go back to the 30 minutes access token.
So, Bridger and Yinghua, follow-up question. So, if you set this to true, right? So that means anyone can connect indefinitely. Is there any place we can see whose unit is from the UI point of view, or you had to go to the German console to find it?
Yeah, we don't. But then, even if it is set to true, you have an auth token for that particular user. So you would only see that Foglight has joined in. I mean, in my case, username Foglight is being logged in.
I think this one only shows the UI login, not for the REST API.
In the audit?
The audit shows the RESTful API as well. Yeah, it's in the audit.
Audit is but for the UI user, there's one user login.
Right. So there is a registry variable setting for audit for REST.
Mm-hmm.
You can set that to true or false, and if it is to true, then REST API logins will also be there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Interesting, I don't find this here. So that's probably how I missed it. But yeah, that auto login feature is available, but you could do it the other way too if you want to set this to false. Is everyone clear on how to use the Postman? That will make your lives easier. So you could try out different samples here.
And Biju, there's probably a stupid question here, but the 58 sample there, is that accessible by our customer as well, or is that just internal?
Well, I don't know the answer. There's no harm in sharing it with others because it is
yeah, they are available. Actually, in the documentation of the REST API, they give you the link that you use Postman to import it. So it's publicly available. It's a Postman URL that downloads this. It's publicly available.
Okay, good. So we'll let our customer know also to play with it if they wish.
Yeah, if they have a need. Yeah, if they already didn't know.
Okay.
So in my presentation slide, I have some sample code for Java and Python, I believe. So there are other sample codes also that I can share. So you could use that and try that out yourself later on. But that makes it way easier. Sorry.
Yeah, this is Alonso. Hi. Can you check the wheel for a moment? I want to see something about the settings that you configure in there, in the upper right hand.
Sorry, what do you want?
The wheel at the very top where you have sign in. Can you please click on the variables that you define on the Postman?
Oh, right.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you have those in there, but can you click okay. Can you click cancel for a moment in there? Okay. You have also globals. You see at the bottom you have globals?
Yeah, you could do that too.
Okay. Yes, because I was trying to configure in my environment and I did in both places.
All right. So when you have this collection, you can then choose if you have different environments, you can choose different set of environment variables. Or if you do no environment, then it'll be the globals.
Okay.
Yeah, you could do that, or you can simply not do any environment variables, but do it on the sample. So like here in the body, you define it yourself here. So there are different ways to do that.
Okay. There is just one more question. I was working in one case with one customer, and developers, they provided some code to register one REST API. I have the KB. I don't know if it's possible to check how you register that on Foglight. I did it through the script console, and then
that is a custom API, right?
Yes, I can send it to you.
Yep, it comes later on in the session, or it is there in the reference guide. So you can refer to that. Yeah, we'll cover that.
All right. Okay, that's all for me for now. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm new to this. I just got this transferred from the dev team recently. So I don't have hands-on first-hand experience with customer issues yet. So yeah, I would need to go through some of the old cases to see what customers have been facing, except for a few that I already know. Okay, so let's move on. If you have so much and if you can make use of the Postman, then the rest of it is easy. You can simply click on each of them, and there are so many examples. You can get all the cartridges there. You can do a lot of different things. We saw the alarm stuff there. Let me see more. So there are basically two ways you use your APIs. One is to query data. The other is to submit data. So we looked at the user. You can have the API to get all the agents or find the agent by ID and all of that. You would see that in the reference guide. You can get current alarms and you can get alarms by ID, by properties. You can clear an alarm if you have the ID of the alarm. You can acknowledge an alarm, all of that through these API calls. So I would recommend that you try out some of these things yourself on the alarm front. Now on the topology front, if you have a topology ID, you can get details of that topology. That is also here somewhere. Yes, you get topology. You get a lot of these stuff there already. These all come under the query APIs. You can do topology query, which is same as the Foglight query language that we use. Let me see if I can find an example. Topology query. You could use so this is a simple Foglight query. You can use host where name equals das, and you could run it, or you need to change the name of the host there. But you could query topology using batch query. You can use the data service syntax to get your observation queries. You can have all the rule information there, and you can have the agent information. You can query pretty much anything that you want from these APIs. I've just listed a few to note, but you can explore this further. Now, there are data submission APIs. That is more useful and more interesting, I guess. In some cases where customers would want to submit an alarm. Now, I think I missed explaining this scenario here. Why would the customer need to use the REST API? If you have a Foglight console, you can query all the data you want. If you have a Foglight agent, then you can put in any data you want and generate alarms. So then why would customers want to use the APIs? There are cases where where customers have an external software, external tool, or a monitoring tool, or a reporting tool, or whatever that they have, and they want to basically integrate some of it with Foglight, whether to read data from Foglight, say there is an alarm on something, and I want to get that alarm and send it somewhere. Not using the Foglight, say the email, but something else, say a paging software or something. Or I want to get, say, memory utilization on a particular host. I want to periodically collect them and send it to another tool that I have. Or you have another, say, a legacy tool that you have, and you want to send or push that alarm back into Foglight. So these are some of the scenarios where the customers would actually want to use the REST APIs. Submitting alarms, we'll just look at one example. The syntax is pretty simple. Let me just say this. May 10th. So this is a sample alarm that you can push into Foglight. You have to define your message, severity, topology object ID. Rule ID is, you can get the rule ID too. you can attach this alarm into a particular topology. Let me try this. Okay, this should be good enough. So you have the API, and this is the path. Hit send, and this is what you can get when you have a wrong topology ID. So all the responses that you get at the client level itself, so you know what is wrong. So there is no topology ID like this, and there is probably not a rule ID. So you could change that to suit your environment and push an alarm. I had one somewhere here that I wanna choose. Okay, now this is another example. So I wanted to send this alarm to Foglight. Severity type is host, and then if you don't know the topology ID, for example, you can use any of the properties to identify the topology. So you could use just the name and try and send this alarm. Remember, there is no topology ID, there is no rule ID here. And let's see what happens. Hit send. Now this is a typical example typical message that you would see when you have a non-unique object. So these exception messages are pretty much straightforward, you would know. And when you have such a case, you can define more properties to uniquely identify this particular object, and then you can try again. So I have pushed out an alarm to my Foglight server. May 10th, this is an alarm message from Postman. Let us look at it from the Foglight console. There you go. Now, I did not mention a rule ID there, so then it will default to the external alarm. That is the default rule that we have. If you want to have it attached to a particular rule ID, you can do that by specifying the rule ID in the other example that you've shown. So this is how you can push out an alarm to Foglight. So trying it out from Postman is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. Similarly, you can do push data into the topology type. Obviously, you need to know the topology schema and the data schemas pretty well to push out data into a particular type name, into a particular object, and this is what you push out, and you define the start time and end time. These are up for you to try out again. Push out data submission. What is this doing here? Sorry, so this is from the other slide. So you have data query APIs, you have data submission APIs, and I wanted to introduce to you some more interesting APIs. So there is a subscribe API, which would allow you to listen to alarms. So you have a Java program, you run it, and you wait for the alarm to happen. As soon as an alarm is created in Foglight, you would get a notification. In the sample code section, I have a sample Java program that you can run, and it will wait for any alarms that gets created, and you would know it right away. Otherwise, you would have to do a query alarm API every now and then to see if there are any alarms, right? So subscribe alarms would automatically get you the alarms as and when it happens. You could try that by yourselves. Another powerful API that is there is you can run scripts through the API, and that is really powerful. You have named scripts in Foglight, like say the positive delta rate or registry or things like that that you can call from the APIs. You could, let me see if I have an example. Yeah, you have, this is for the script, but you have a example for run API for name script. You can call this. Or you can run any Groovy script on the Foglight. And pretty much anything that you run on the script console can be run through the APIs. Now that is really powerful. You could pretty much do anything through the scripts in the API. Just to note that function helper and specific time range are WCF stuff, and that is not available. Other than that, everything else is available through the scripts. Now, because it is so powerful, we have it disabled by default. And where do you enable it? Under Administration, REST API, this is where it can be enabled. It is disabled by default, and it can be enabled. And this is one example where, as an administrator, you can disable any part of the API that you don't want your clients to use. So this can be handy if you have, say, you have a custom API that you don't want other clients to use it. You can disable it here. Likewise, you could disable anything that you want from this dashboard. So this is one use for this dashboard. Run scripts. You can run any scripts. Now, custom API was what Alonso was referring to. You can create your own custom API and publish it. You could go to your Foglight Console help, REST APIs. You can go into script, and you have all the examples, and you have an example for custom REST API. So you have the full template that you can use to create a custom API, and it can be any script that you would can use it. So it can be published onto the Foglight console. So you just need to make that script call. Now there's one known issue for this. This custom API script that you create does not get persisted, and so it will not be saved when you restart your Foglight server. That is a known issue at this time. I'm not sure if there's a timeline to fix it, but there is a workaround. You can define this custom API in a persistible script in a cartridge, or you can do a symbol rule that starts up, that runs every time you start up Foglight, and so that it gets re-registered as a custom REST API script. That's the only thing that you need to note regarding the custom API. But then it's up to you. You could try out these examples here. Not just this one, but you can try out any of the examples here. So if you go to Topology Data, you have the syntax that you have to use. And there are so many examples here. So some of the APIs that I didn't cover in detail, you could use a lot of these examples to try and do it yourself. And you have Postman for your help and all of these examples. So it should be easier for you to try out different API calls. So that is pretty much the one-on-one session that should get you to do it. So this is a Java example, also an example how to subscribe alarms. This is a Python sample code that you can use. There are other examples too that I can share that you can use to try this out. So any questions? We have still 1 more minute, but I'm available for some more time. If you have any questions, I can answer them or can find the answer for you. Open for questions.
Biju, Clay Jackson here. On the subscribe alarms, I assume that then you have to have some sort of a loop or something running on the API side to be looking for a notification that there's a new alarm?
Right. So from the Java code, so this one, it is in a loop. You are simply waiting for it to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just and if it finds an alarm, yeah. Okay, I get it.
Right. Any more questions?
Yes, one question. When you, at the beginning, were configuring the Postman, you enter the URL to get all the pre-configured REST API that you can use. But if you register one from Script Console in Foglight, how do you see that one here on the Postman? How do you get that custom?
Sorry, can you go again? So these are, so when you import it from the link, these are all the examples that are already there, and you could use them. But I didn't get the second part of your question.
Yeah, that is correct. But if you then register one using the Script Console, one custom from Foglight, how do you see that one here, the custom?
Oh, so right. So we don't have a custom API example here, which means that we need to create one here. You could create another example, right? So these are the set ones, and you could create one more like this. And
okay, so that means you need to register the REST API on Foglight through a Script Console and then create it here as well, both places.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe at some point we would have an example added to this. At some point.
All right. Thank you.
Again, remember this is a session, this is your first session. For most of you, this is just an intro. And you have a lot of these examples. You can go to the help and find a lot more APIs that are available. I did not touch on all of them, but you could go through all of them and see what you can learn from all of that with the Postman examples that you have. I guess there are no more questions. Thank you for your time. You can get back to me with questions if you want. I will share the recording of this session as well as the presentation slides. And if you have questions, I can try and answer them, or I will try and find the answer for you.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, Biju.
Thank you.
Thank you.